Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
This is your time. This is your call to arms. For the Cryptid Connection is your voice. I'm your host, Jennifer.
And I'm your host, Stephen. Welcome to Cryptid Connection.
The Cryptid Connection podcast is brought to you by CryptidConnection.com, a website dedicated to you, one who has interest in all things cryptid and paranormal. CC is a place where you can enjoy a hassle-free lifestyle and community of Bigfoot pursuit. Stop by via the internet and visit. Guarantee you will start to feel at home. CryptidConnection.com.
Hey, everybody. This episode of Cryptid Connection, we've got Jerry Hestand. Jerry is out of Northeast Texas, and he's with the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, otherwise known as NAWAC or the NAWAC. Jerry, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Oh, we're doing okay.
We're hiding in our own little corner. How are you, Jerry?
Yeah, we've been having to do that ourselves. I got a crew of 3 other guys with me, and we've been pretty much stuck in the house and just so glad to get out in the woods for a change.
Well, right now I can tell you, I think you're about the envy of most of the cryptid community out there. I know I was supposed to be out in Oklahoma this weekend, and there's just no way I can make it, not with my job and everything else. And it's just making you go even more stir crazy. So, but anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Enough of that. Jerry, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you come from?
Well, I grew up in Grayson County, Texas. It's right south of Lake Texoma, which is part of the Red River that separates Oklahoma and Texas. Grew up in the country and did all the regular country boy stuff, and saw the movies of the 70s and really got hooked on it because, my mother would say, look out for a booger, and I knew what a booger was. It was something the Three Stooges ran into, or Tarzan, or one of the old detective movies, so I knew what a booger was, and just grabbed me, the Legend of Boggy Creek and some of the others, and kept up with it in magazines, and there was a flap during the 70s and kind of died down, and in the 80s it came back for a while when the cable television first started. They started doing documentaries, and that grabbed me. And finally, I got on the internet around 1999 and looked up Bigfoot. And there was a brand new group called Texas Bigfoot Research Center, and I went to the first meeting in January of 2001, and actually met some guys that had seen these animals in Texas and Louisiana and places, and it just blew my mind because when I saw the Legend of Boggy Creek when I was in junior high, I vowed if a group ever started looking for the creature, I wanted to do it. So I joined up, and right away we had some interesting reports from around Cooper Lake and Lake Tawakoni, and had actually saw some things, heard some vocalizations, and we found some tracks at one location to start out, so I was hooked, and I've been doing this for years and years. I worked with Craig. It is Craig Woolheater, who started the first Texas Bigfoot Conference in Jefferson, Texas, and that's been fun down through the years. And we did a lot of outings for years and years at different parts in North Texas and southern Oklahoma, and had some interesting encounters. And finally, we evolved to the Texas Bigfoot Research Conservancy. We're a tax-exempt group that we take our money towards dues and equipment, and now we're the North American Wood Ape Conservancy because our goal is to conserve land and conserve the habitat and hopefully prove the animal exists. And had a sighting a couple of years ago with my friend Marvin Leeper, who's here, and so I know they're real, and we've had continuing interaction with these creatures for the last 8 years in Oklahoma. So no point in going anywhere else, and that's pretty much where we're at today.
Jerry, you're out in the field right now, am I correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us what kind of an area you're in and what brought you there?
Well, we're in a big bottomland area. In my book, Hunting Apes in America, my life as a Bigfoot hunter, and in David Weatherly's Wood Knocks 3, I talk about, and my friend Marvin Leeper talk about the Boggy Bottom Monster. And for decades, Anglos have known about some mysterious wild man, they would call it, that's haunted these bottomlands, and the Native Americans actually knew about it before the white man got here and told them about it. So I had no clue. If you're driving on Highway 6975 from Dallas to Tulsa, you drive right over the clear muddy boggy and the muddy boggy and the north boggy, and the whole area is just a huge bottomland and a perfect habitat for these animals. So my job at one time was to take care of the north central Texas and southern Oklahoma reports, and I did that, and it included Atoka County. And I think the first report I worked on, 2 children were playing on one of the creeks, and they heard a sound up in the brush and looked up, and there was a Bigfoot there. So it just scared the crud out of them, and they scrambled up the steep bank and got on their four-wheelers to go home, and there was another one on a tree by their four-wheeler. So they took off and went home and told their family about it, and the word got out, and I can't remember if they sent a report to us or not. I'm pretty sure they did. But anyway, my friend Mark Porter and I, who's here tonight, went and investigated it and talked to the children and their parents. They said, yeah, something scared the heck out of our kids. And I talked to them, and they said, yeah, we saw what we saw. We'd heard of it, but we never thought we'd actually see it. So that night, my friend Mark Porter and I went down to the same location where they had their encounter, and we sat there for a good long while, and in the same spot the little girl saw it across the creek, we heard a movement and breaking of branches and some snorting and some huffing, and we waited and waited, and nothing ever come out. But that was my first, and I've had a couple other reports, but my friend Marvin Leeper has investigated this area for years with his buddy John Harrell, and this area goes back to at least the Depression area, when there was a lady who lived on a creek that ran into one of the boggy creeks, to the clear boggy, and it was Depression era. Her and a little girl were down by the creek digging out some wild onions with a little spade because, the easy free food, and the little baby started crying and screaming, and the woman looked up, and the little baby was pointing to something crouched down on the other side, and it was a wood ape, is what we call them. A wood ape was digging up wild onions with a stick, and it stopped and stood up and scared the heck out of the lady. She grabbed the baby and ran as fast as she could through the woods, and it started chasing her on the other side of the creek, just running after her, and she finally was so exhausted she had to stop, and this animal just stopped, right out of sight. But anyway, it chased her all the way back to the house, and finally her husband got home, and they said, well, we've seen the Boggy Bottom Monster, the wild man that lives there. And I think probably, right before they went to bed, they heard something out on the side of the house, like it was moving up and down or scratching or beating on the side of the house. And my friend Marvin here is just documented reports from Depression area, just bus drivers and other people having this thing coming up towards them. And we actually got an opportunity just about this time last year. There was a lady who Marvin knew that, it was October of last year. She said she would take her grandchild to the bus early in the morning before the sun come up, and something would move up and down the creek screaming at her and, moving bushes and stuff. And she'd rush the child to the bus and run home, and it did it several mornings in a row, and eventually it got to where this animal was coming to the trailer at night and screaming and moving around the trailer. And this is the exact same location, I told you about, the one digging the onions at. So we're not too far from there. We're at an abandoned cemetery out here in the middle of the country, and there's been some stories surrounding this place.
Okay, so you have a fairly extensive history and an established backstory as to why you're in the area that you're in. How is it that y'all, or you specifically, how do you normally carry it out when you go out in the field? What's your normal routine?
Well, the NAWAC has their own protocol as far as our investigations. Basically, if you'll go to our website at woodape.org, you can read reports from the past and you can catch up on what we're doing. But a lot of people in the Bigfoot community have heard of a place called Area X where we research, and we have our own protocol. Like I said, a lot of times, we'll have dark camps, but above that, we have certain equipment we use. We have some expensive thermal cameras and a very expensive recording device that goes 24/7, 365 days a year, and we come in for a week at a time. We've got, 70, 80 members maybe, and once you become investigator status, you come in for a week and stay and just document what you've heard and seen. And we've been doing that for about 8 years, and we've had some just incredible things happen. But, we're out here. There's no telephone. There's no running water. There's no toilet. There's nothing but woods. And for a radius of 10 miles at least, there's not really any roads or houses, anything. We're just right in the middle of it. So we've got some pretty strict procedures, as far as when we research and how we research, and, if we were to do a call blast or, our basic equipment, I guess, is the thermal cameras, and naturally we're required to bring in our own equipment if we need to. So it's been a long, strange trip, I must say.
So is every time that you go out, would it be considered essentially officially a NAWAC function? Or I guess what I'm saying is everything you do under the auspices of NAWAC, or is there anything you do on your own?
Yeah, this is on our own, and we still have mostly NAWAC members, but this is on our own. We're just all close to this area, and Marvin and John have lived here all their life, and they've heard the stories, just firsthand accounts for years and years. So this is kind of on our own, but, if we came up with anything really incredible, I'm sure more members would come in and research the area with us.
Do you have a specific camp set up, Jerry, that helps or benefits your ability to get more evidence?
Not here in Atoka County. Now, up in the Ouachita Mountains where the Area X is, yes, we have a camp set up. We built a little cabin, and we keep, all of our equipment in that area. We have we're trying to collect a specimen, so we have a shooter area at night where we can hunt for these things at night. It's pretty well set up, and we have lots of different game cameras that we've gone back to after abandoning the idea years ago, and we have some radio tags actually that we've set out, and had one of those come loose on an animal that we tracked for about a year. So we're using everything we do, and then of course the latest thing is eDNA. So if we find something that prompts us to, there would definitely be a wood ape in the area, we would use the eDNA kit and send it to somebody.
So you're freestyling tonight.
Yeah, we do have some thermal cameras and may have some audio equipment, but yeah, it's mainly just for the fun of it, because out here, it's just, you never know. Sometimes you come out, the investigators that are listening know most of the time you don't hear anything, but those few times that you either hear some crazy screams or something starts moving up in you in the brush and it disappears before you can get a sighting of it. That's the good, fun adrenaline rush of it.
That's what we all live for, is something that makes our blood rush and think, oh, that might have been it.
Yeah, there's been, half a dozen times I talk about in my book where I think I was in close proximity to these things. You almost say it couldn't have been anything else. And then I had a really close encounter, one come in by my tent up in Area X, and I had a visual 2 years ago in June that a friend of mine, Marvin, that's here, we clearly saw one. So he and I are out of the 99%ers, think, 99% they're real. We're knowers now, and it's a different world. It's just a life-changing event.
Can you tell me, Jerry, where could I find that book?
The best place to go is to my website, www.jerryhestand.com. You can get a signed copy there, probably cheaper than Amazon, where you can also get it. But you can also look at pictures and videos from years, like 2 decades of my work. That's, I don't have a lot of Bigfoot tracks to show, but I have the sighting areas that I talk about in my book listed there. And we've taken quite a fair amount of videos over the years, so that's where I would go. And it's called Hunting Apes in America. My Life as a Bigfoot Hunter.
Jerry?
Yes.
You mentioned you've got your thermal and you've got some audio that are out there with you. Am I correct?
Yeah, we have some recording devices, yes.
Okay. Would it be too much to ask what actual brand equipment or what models you use?
Olympus recorder.
We got an Olympus recorder.
We got a supersonic sound ear.
Supersonic sound ear.
That goes into the recorder.
Goes in the recorder.
Then we have a FLIR B2 thermal.
We have a FLIR B2 thermal wand, and then I just picked up I believe it's called a RAS2 thermal monocular video recorder, and that's what we've got tonight. Just our own stuff.
Okay. No, I'm just curious because I always like to know what other researchers are carrying and everything. Because if nothing else, you've used it, it's in the field, and if you're still using it, that tends to kind of say a good thing about hey, is this a model other people may want to look into or not? So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the world changed for me dramatically when I looked through my first thermal, because there's no doubt about it. I wished I'd had one back in 2001 and all the places I've been, because when you look through the thermal at night, there is no doubt about it what you're looking at. It's a raccoon or a wood ape, whatever it is. So that would be my first purchase if I was a new investigator. You can buy some decent ones for $800, and that would be number one.
Let's try a little something different here. I want to have I have a question here, Jerry, and if your other friends would like to participate, I would love to have them answer this, but it's one of my typical questions.
Okay.
What are your top 3 pet peeves in the cryptid culture today?
Wow, that's a tough one, pet peeves. I go along with Shelley Covington, Montana, which you've had on the show. We're all citizen scientists, and really there is no hard evidence that these things exist. And I would like people to be more analytic in their investigations. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that people are misinterpreting. That's my number one peeve. Number 2, there's some of us that really take this serious in a scientific manner, but there's others that, how could I say it nicely? Maybe they think it's interdimensional or from another planet, which is fine. I don't know that they're not. That's a pet peeve. And my third one, I don't know. I think, my third one, and it really should be number 1. My number 1 peeve is people not recognizing the fact that we're going to have to collect a specimen. Our goal is to prove these animals exist and preserve the species. But if you're doing it for fun, that's okay too. You know, we accept you, and it's fun to think about. It's a family-friendly hobby, and but you know, let's do it scientifically. I guess that's my thing.
Agreed.
Okay. And you answered that very diplomatically, by the way.
Yeah, I tried.
The community is rampant with either misinformation or, more importantly, incorrect or misleading. I'm not wanting to say hoax, but the truth is we have hoax information that is often coming up out of the community and everything. Have y'all had to deal with that in the past? Has it messed things up? I mean, how often do you get false leads and everything?
Well, back in the beginning when we first started, like we were 2 or 3 years in, we had some hoaxers, and I really don't want to say the places they happened, but one was in North Texas and one was in Southeast Texas, and it really, you know, it just kind of ticked us off after it was all over with, because we wasted all that time and effort going up to these places, and come to find out they were hoaxers. And yeah, it's been a pain, and hats off to Daniel Perez in his last issue of Bigfoot Times. He exposed the Minnesota Iceman, and that's kind of one of our holy grails. You know, we want it to be real. We really want it to be real, but over the years, over and over and over, there's, no matter how bad you want it to be real, you've got to be scientific and look at it. And if there's any leads, like Daniel followed up on, if there's any leads that points to the thing you're investigating in a certain area is real, take it. But if there's, you know, stuff saying this is all a bunch of baloney here, then take that into consideration and move on.
Okay, since you brought up the Minnesota Iceman and Daniel Perez and his investigation and everything, could you elaborate on that some for some of our members who may not know what you're talking about?
Sure. In my book, I think about the second or third chapter. In my book, I talk about my lifetime from when I was young, you know, growing up, teenager, 20s and 30s, joining the TBRC, and then all of the investigations that I had over 20 years that I thought something actually occurred. But when I was a teenager, probably 14, my parents went to Heaston, Kentucky, which, you know, where our relatives came from, and we would go up into the Appalachian Mountains and go, you know, all up through there. And one summer before we left, we had a cab over camper, and I would sleep up in the top. And I went to the magazine store to get some reading material, and I saw a magazine, Saga magazine that said I killed the ape man of Whiteface. So I grabbed it and looked in it, and there was a picture of this, looked like a Bigfoot frozen in a piece of ice. So I read it, and this man, I think his last name was Hansen, claimed that in this article, he claimed that he was hunting out in the woods in Minnesota one winter, and he shot a deer, it ran off, he followed it, and there was a group of Bigfoot that had caught the deer and was eating it. So he shot at one of them and ran, and later on, believe it became winter, it was snowing and everything, and his wife was gone, and he got his dog and went back to the area where he had shot this deer and possibly shot a Bigfoot, and was walking through the snow, and he tripped over something, and here was this dead Bigfoot body frozen. So he put it in his truck and spirited it home and took it down in the basement and emptied his freezer and cut some of the tendons and ligaments to this Neanderthal type creature and put it in the freezer and froze it. So in my teenage mind, I could just see a guy backing his truck up in the dark, unloading a dead man ape into his dark basement and filling it full of ice. But in the article, he went ahead and said, you know, I didn't know what I had, so I started touring the carnival circuit, and I believe it was 35 cents. You could see a Neanderthal man that had been killed, and it looked pretty good. So for years and years and years, I thought, man, that's a cool story. I hope it's real. And then, as the years progressed, it went away, and then Lyle Blackburn's close friend of mine, they did a show called Storage Wars where they moved this Minnesota Iceman to the Museum of the Weird in Austin, Texas. And I don't remember if he told me at the time, but he said, well, you know, I got to look at it unfrozen. It's just a rubber dummy, good rubber dummy, mind you, but it's a rubber dummy. So now this creature resides at Museum of the Weird in Austin, Texas, and I want to go down there and look at it. But, you know, wanted it to be real and kind of popped my bubble that it wasn't. But that's what real Bigfoot research is about. You've got to investigate and get to the bottom of the story.
And so there's no question on the provenance or anything like that. We're very certain that what we have now today is the same creature or same exhibit that was back original. We've been able to trace it.
Yeah. Like I said, Lyle, he's an investigative journalist, and he said, man, I saw it, and it was fake, and it is what it is, whether you know. And then Daniel talked to all of the different people, scientists that had been fooled by it, and you just have to take it in hand. And we as researchers, we just cannot. And I hate to even say the Gimlin film. I've talked to Bob Gimlin, and I've looked at the film over and over, and I think it's real, but you just can't have your holy grails and be a scientist. You have to take, you know, if something turns out to be a fake or a misrepresentation, like you said, the tree twist and the bedding areas and the things like that, or tracks that are kind of smudgy, you really have to use your best judgment on things like that.
You have to always be willing to go where the evidence ultimately shows, whether it's pro or con. You just got to follow the truth.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I talked about the Danny Sweeten story in my book, which basically there was a man in Texas who had a video recorder and went to video record with the brand new VHS recorders that had come out as some land he was wanting to buy. And supposedly this Bigfoot was asleep under a tree and jumped up and forearmed him under the chin. And I knew a guy that talked to him right afterwards, and he said, yeah, the guy had dental records and everything to prove that something happened. But it's very possible that later on he did some hoaxing and was exposed. And I found that kind of be true over the years. I think people originally, I don't know how many times I went down to a dead-end road in East Texas, and there's a woman who had a Bigfoot come to her house or trailer, had beat on the side of it, had scared her kids, had peered in the windows, and I think they had an actual encounter. But then, say, 3 months pass, and we'd been coming up there every weekend, and we quit coming, said, here's a camera and an audio recorder. If it comes back, let us know. I think they lose that attention, and they start embellishing stuff. And we've kind of gotten over the years to where, you know, once that starts, we can kind of tell, and we get a lot of reports into our database from all over, and you get to where you can kind of tell something's being fabricated. And I can't tell you how we can figure that out other than, you know, it's just, look at this one, this is crazy, this is nonsense, and we disregard it. We pretty much stick to recent reports, you know, from the 4-state area, and then we really focus on Area X. I
understand. Yeah, it's funny you brought up Danny Sweeten. That whole Danny Sweeten episode is currently, it's still an ongoing conversation in our fan page. And we even had Craig Woolheater came out and put a whole bunch of source material and everything else about it. And he had done a presentation at Footstock just last year, this last fall, over it, and it was actually very interesting. And you're right, it's an interesting story. But on that same note, you mentioned how people may have an initial encounter, and all intents that was real, but then you have so many people that afterwards they just keep saying or seeing the same thing. It's like they get addicted to the attention. And they just go on and on. And you get to the point where you've got people who are saying, you know, I've had 7 sightings in 5 years, you know, or something like that. And there's just no corroborating evidence for it. There's nothing supporting it. And without the supporting evidence of any kind, all it does is really detract from what may have been an actual original good sighting to begin with.
Yeah, well said. Well said. It's true. These animals in East Texas, I mean, they can't live around somebody's house constantly. You know, they're just going to move through, and they're going to be there for a few nights for some reason, and then they move on. And we're fortunate enough where we have an area where these animals live year-round. And, you know, Falk, Arkansas, I'm pretty certain there's a population there that live year-round. And the Big Thicket, I think people have talked about that on your show, and we've had, you know, screams at us and had one come into camp down there. So Big Thicket, Sam Houston National Forest, all of those places, there's real stuff going on, but then you got to be careful because people just, and really they're really nice people. They mean well. When I was in the BFRO, they were really stringent. I remember I did a report from a guy in north central Texas who claimed to see a Bigfoot in his barn, and it ran across the field after it left the barn, and it was lit up by the bright moon. And the curators, what they were called in the BFRO, would take the report and investigate it, and they looked that date up, and there was no moon. So either the guy was mistaken on the date, or it was just a hoax. And I remember I had a report from a guy that saw one from an airplane up there, and I never got to talk to him. Actually, that was a newspaper article, and I didn't get to follow up, but I've had reports from north central Oklahoma, and it's really strange.
You know, I think it's interesting that you mentioned north central Oklahoma and everything else. I don't know if you had listened, but a couple of shows back, we carried Anthony Shields, and he relayed a story that happened right on the Oklahoma-Kansas border up there about a crop duster who had seen an animal, and you know, from his plane while he was crop dusting. And so now you're saying you also have reports and everything from up in that area as well?
Yeah, when I heard that episode, I thought, I wonder if it's the same report that I got. It was a newspaper article, and it talked about a man in an airplane had flown over and seen a Bigfoot. And it seems like in the one I did, the guy had to land for some reason and saw it from the wood line, but I know there was a guy flying an airplane over an open field and saw a Bigfoot. And Lyle Blackburn has also did a report, I think, from Louisiana, where a guy, he wasn't a crop duster, I think he just had his own airstrip and was a pilot, had taken off from his house, and a ape walked nearly underneath his airplane, and he turned around and the thing was standing there looking up at him and walked back into the tree line. So that would be pretty cool to be a pilot and see one right down below you.
That's a fascinating story. I can't imagine being up in a plane and seeing that on the ground. I just would want to land as fast as possible to try to chase it.
Yeah, I hear you.
So speaking of hoaxes, we've got those, and then we've got the true encounters that people have. What needs to happen to create the magic moment where Bigfoot, Sasquatch, skunk apes, they become actually scientifically proven animals? What's the magic moment that needs to happen to have that happen?
Well, unfortunately, in most of the Bigfoot community, we admit there has to be a specimen collected some way. Our group had a training camp in the winter, and the first thing we said out of the box is we don't want to kill a Bigfoot. We're not out just to kill one just to be killing. We're trying to collect a scientific specimen for study to prove these animals exist, because all across southern Oklahoma, North Texas, the habitat's being destroyed. Where we go into, just miles and miles of trees have been clear cut to be replanted for wood pulp, and there's a lot of reservoirs being built in North Texas that are destroying bottomland habitat. And that's what we're all about. We just want to preserve the habitat for the other animals, and it would be a hard thing, because I've talked to the experts on the subject, but they said it'd be a hard thing to get an area established as being protected for these animals. But we're really amateur citizen scientists, but then the scientific community would come in that would have the hours and the manpower to study these animals and see what they were. So we're going to have a specimen. And we said in our training camp it would be better, we'd be happier if a truck driver would run over one, or somebody would accidentally shoot one hunting, or just find a body, just find, a partial skeleton, and the mystery would be over.
Okay, we've done a lot of talking here, and you've still been sitting out there in the woods. Have we been distracting you or anything like that? Has there been anything weird or any coyotes, anything like that going on?
Yeah, I'm looking through the little eastern red cedars, and the sun's going down, and we've already heard a bunch of coyotes to our south, and we've got the old gravestones behind us, you can see in the dim light, and it's pretty spooky considering, my buddies and I, or my friends Marvin and John, have been growled at and had thrown at them, or had sticks and rocks thrown at them, and it's a pretty good area on occasion. They don't live here; they just pass through. So we're just sitting here pretty quiet and waiting for it to get dark. And once it does, we'll just hike down quietly to this more of a bottomland. And there's an old tree stand and a big hog wallow down there, and we'll just set up in teams and sit and listen and wait and see if anything happens.
Will the three of you probably physically stay together, or we all split apart? How would you do that?
Yeah, we'll split up. Sometimes we get in teams, but tonight I think we'll just split up into four of us at different locations, and we've got 2 or 3 thermals so we can, scan the area, and we're pretty, what's the word? We're not skeptical. We're just very, not jumping at little sounds. It's going to have to be something pretty impressive for us to pay attention. And like I said, I've had Marvin and John have been had these animals walk beside them. They've come up to wooded areas where the animals just right out of their eyesight. I can't remember what kind of weird sounds. It seems like it was imitating some sort of animal. Yeah, it was imitating a wounded rabbit, and when they got closer to this wounded rabbit, it started growling at them, and they had some stuff thrown at them, so it wasn't a rabbit.
Now, that's interesting, though. It was imitating a wounded rabbit.
Yes.
Is the idea being that it itself was possibly preying on other predators? Do you think it was trying to draw in, say, a coyote or a large cat, something like that, and that's what it was doing?
It could have been, because not very often you found intact deer skeletons, but they found pretty much an intact deer skeleton. They found 3 of them. And it's as though something had killed the deer and just sat down and picked it clean, rather than, like coyotes, and the legs were broken on it. And so that's a pretty good sign. And these things will imitate other animals and different sounds. We've heard the whole gamut up in our Area X. We've heard the Sierra sounds. We've heard Ohio howls. We've heard screams and growls. And we've heard animals that aren't supposed to be there. And we're just convinced that they will probably, to try to scare people out of their area, they'll make different animal sounds, or just to see what reaction they'll get out of us.
One of the strangest things I ever witnessed was in Sam Houston. Myself and 2 other guys were walking down a recently cleared logging road, and it wasn't open to the public. It was still bermed. They still had the construction equipment down there. But out of nowhere, there was a perfect elk bugle.
Wow.
And the elk bugled twice, and at the end of the bugle, it all of a sudden became a coyote. I mean, it was just, if it was 2 different animals, they were so perfectly tone matched that it sounded just like, well, they went from one call to all of a sudden starting to use another. And I used to live in the I used to live in the Northwest. I'm familiar with elk bugles, and that was an elk. I mean, we all looked at it looked at each other and we're like, what's an elk doing down here? You know, why do you have that? And it's funny, you mentioned that you hear animal calls occasionally that are not native to that region. And I myself have actually witnessed that before.
I'm going to say, in my experience, we witnessed a triangulated train sound from something. Yes. That was odd.
Yeah, we did do that. We did do that. We had that too. But, you know, just the unusual sounds, things you don't often expect and everything. Could it have been a hunter or something like? Yeah, I suppose it could have been, but it sure did seem a little bit louder than what a hunter would do. And furthermore, why would a hunter make that noise when you're not in hunting season out in the middle of the woods? I mean, it's like there's no point for it. And there weren't other sounds being made. And so I get what you're saying. I do understand that does happen every now and then.
Yeah, my friend Lyle Blackburn's first Beast of Boggy Creek book, the cover has a picture of a falcon monster kind of crouched down in a swamp, and that was one of the first reports the Texas Bigfoot Research Conservancy did many years ago. A coon hunter was by himself in the bottomlands and heard something screaming, and it got closer, and him and his dog witnessed this big hair-covered animal, and it reached down into the swampy water and splashed water up on him and hissed at him like a cat. It was strange. But we followed up, and we played some recordings that were actually made in a recording studio out into the swamp one night, and immediately something way off in the middle of bottomland screamed back exactly what we were playing. And so it was mimicking my friend Smokey Crabtree that was in the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek. Told me a lot that they would go look for it, and it would start meowing like a kitten, and then it'd move a little bit further off, and it would howl like a wounded dog. And his son had shot it at a falcon monster. It's kind of got the thing started, and it was making the sound of a wounded dog. But he said, anyway, Jerry, it would move off further and further away from our camp, and eventually it sounded like an African elephant screaming at us. So, you know, he was certain. And he said when they went out to hunt it, he would play a wounded rabbit call, and it would scream back at him. So pretty interesting stuff as far as the sounds they can make.
I'm gonna have to break your heart here for a second because
okay.
of
before.
No, it's okay. Because of COVID and both of our jobs, we don't have a quiz for you set up, so you get to escape the cryptid quiz or whatever.
I'm awfully sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I am awfully sorry about that, Jerry, but I just didn't have the time.
That's okay. We need to make a board game, don't we? A Bigfoot board game, you know, where you know the names of the famous researchers and sighting areas and stuff like that.
Oh, that sounds like fun. I'd play that game.
Don't give her ideas.
Yeah.
No, he gave me an idea.
Thank you. I appreciate it. No. Oh, that's the end. No. All right. No, I just wanted to let you know because we're at the interview where we probably would throw that in as a breaker.
I got one good story for you about Sam Houston, just a quick one before we leave. We investigated Sam Houston National Forest for years and years, just got reports there, just dozens, I guess, of reports from there, and actually had a guy by the name of Mike Mays, before he joined our group, he just on his own drove north part of Sam Houston and saw a panther cross the road about 2 a.m. And then about 4 a.m, a Bigfoot crossed in front of his truck, and it just blew his mind. But we had reports and reports from coming there and around that area. But what is cool and what keeps me doing this is just a thing that happened about 4 years ago. There was a guy in Van Alstyne, Texas, right south of Howe, Texas, where I live, and he had a little barbecue stand, and we went there a lot to pick up barbecue, and my brother was visiting, and he had a Texas Bigfoot Research Conservancy hat on, and the guy asked him about Bigfoot, and he said, well, I've encountered one, you know, you need to bring your brother down here, I want to tell him about it. So anyway, he said when he was a kid, him and his father were fishing at Lake Conroe. And they finished and went into an old feed store, and an old man come running in saying, there's a big hairy monster just came to my farm. It killed a couple of my pigs and grabbed one and ran down the creek. Y'all need to come and help me get it. And nobody would do it. And he was a little boy at the time. He scared, said, Daddy, is that true? He said, no, just don't pay any attention to that. So fast forward to his teenage years, it was Thanksgiving, the family were together, and they watched a Bigfoot documentary, and he mentioned his dad. He said, hey, that time that old man came into the feed store, that was real, wasn't it? He said, oh, yeah. I said, it's real. He said, as a matter of fact, one time I was out in my boat on the shore of this creek, and something started growling at me and just shaking the bushes like he was going to rip the bushes out of the ground. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was something I didn't want to be around, so I reeled in my line and started the motor up and took off to the boat ramp as fast as I could. And the son said, well, Dad, the boat ramp was a long ways away. Why did you speed off so quick? And he said, well, I was so scared I was afraid it would beat me to the boat dock. But we got out a gazetteer of Texas, and I said, show me on the map where you had this encounter. The old man come into the feed store, and your dad heard something while he's fishing, and I'll be darned if he didn't point to the exact same place where we'd had 3 reports. So that's not something that's just happenstance. There's something there.
Yeah, Sam has a definite history. My whole issue with Sam is it's become too popular, and you've got anybody and everybody out there now, and it's very hard to distinguish the fact from the fiction, I guess is what you want to say.
Yeah.
And plus,
the game wardens out there.
Yeah, getting pulled over a few times has put a damper on things. But
a friend of mine by the name of Annie told me about that, and I couldn't believe it. But it's a shame, like where the coon hunter story came from. I told you about it was a place called Thornton Wells. Everybody knows about it, and he had his encounter. We started investigating there. We were on an episode of Monster Quest called Swamp Stalker, and it was on there. So the old man that lived down the road, when we first came there, he kind of laughed, but he said, I'm not surprised y'all are looking for it here because I've seen panthers and things. But he said, I've never heard of one being at the Thornton Wells boat ramp. Well, since that happened and Lyle wrote his book and I wrote my book and included the story, and, it was on Monster Quest. Now the old man says there's campers down there every weekend looking for the Falk monster. So it's kind of a drag to have your good places, ruined. And like you said, who knows if what you're hearing is another researcher playing a call blast.
We hear it all the time down there. It's gotten to the point that in Sam Houston specifically, I just have a no call blast policy.
We go in quiet.
You're around me, we're not call blasting because we don't know who's within a half a mile. We may think we're entirely separate and quiet and alone, but there have been one too many times you find out later, there they were. They were up, they were that vehicle that was parked a mile up the road, and they were just 200 yards into the woods or something like that, just far enough you couldn't see them from the road. I've literally had that before where we've call blasted and someone else responds, and you're like, that doesn't sound quite right. That kind of sounds like a person, or something like that. And you do it again, and they do it again. And next thing you know, you're on Facebook and someone's saying, oh, I've caught these wonderful things. And you're like, no, you caught me, or something. We joke about it, but that is a real situation that really does occur. And
we try to minimize it by just having a quieter camp.
Yeah. That's all you can do. Be a quiet, cold, dark camp. I know when we first started, we always like to have had, nice, decent campfires. Now when we're out, that campfire, unless it's a freezing cold night.
Or cooking.
Yeah, or we're cooking. It's a very low fire if we have a fire at all. And so I know exactly.
My theory is these things don't like, and the whole time that I've been doing research since 2001, these animals don't like people being out in the woods at night, not making sound. They need to know where we're at all the time if there's some around. And they will try to get your attention and see what the heck you're doing. And it's better to have a dark camp, because most people that go in the woods have, campfires and bright lights and music and four-wheelers and all that, and they want to know where you're at. And if you're sitting there quiet, they almost have to send a sentry in to see what you're doing, or more than likely try to scare you out of the area.
Ever since I read the Wood Apes monograph that y'all released, and I saw the canopy that y'all had come up with that you had wrapped in the black plastic, and you could still see with your thermal out of it. I haven't replicated it yet, but I have wanted to, just because of what you're saying, that exact thing about being in the woods. You're there. They know you're there, but they can't see you. They can't see what you're doing. If you're being very quiet, I can see a lot of potential with that.
Yeah, it's like you're present, but you're not present.
Yeah, and it just, they want to know. And if you deny them that knowledge, then I can see that as actually being a very effective lure to get them to come in closer just to check out and see what you're doing. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, when we do that, we're deathly quiet. We take off our shoes. We don't make a sound. We've got a swivel chair that we can just scan back and forth, and we've had a lot of good stuff happen. I mean, back in the day when that monograph was written, you just had to be there to believe it. I can't believe all that stuff happened, but it did. And I was on a bunch of those weeks that it was crazy. They were throwing stuff. They were banging on the cabin. We would put up game cameras, and it seems like they'd avoid them. We put up a security camera. It seems as soon as we turned it on, they'd disappear, and when we turned it off, they'd come back. So it's crazy stuff. But what happened? And we've seen them, through the black plastic. One guy in particular took a shot at one through the black plastic, and just a limb deflected the bullet, or it would be over with. But that is the way to go. Real quiet and behind that black plastic.
Do you mind my asking, and I don't remember if this was mentioned in the monograph at all, what kind of black plastic was that y'all used? Do you know what kind of a thickness or?
I'm not sure. It's not a
bags will work.
Yeah, Marvin Leeper said trash bags would work, and it's pretty thin, but you can get it in sheets. I don't know if it says so on the monograph, but you could just get a trash bag, a thin one and a thick one, and see what measurement would work the best.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys were using like a 0.6 mil or a 1 mil, however, because different trash bags come in different thicknesses, and I just didn't know if that's actually what it was, or if it was some special Mylar plastic or something like that. Okay.
I'm not sure. It came in big rolls, but yeah, you can get it probably at your local stores.
Okay.
Jerry, we all have these moments in the woods while we're out there just minding our own business, and we trip over a stump and we make a complete, utter fool of ourselves. I would like to know, what, Jerry, is your oops moment in the woods?
Okay, I've got a perfect oops moment. We were at the old compound that we call it, where we used to research right up beside a mountain. And I was really tired, and there was this old bedroom at the front of the cabin. We later called it the doctor's suite, which is a story in my book, and that's a whole different thing. But I was asleep because there was a doctor in the group that slept there all the time. But anyway, guys said, hey, it's after lunch. We're all going out and, patrol and see if we can see anything. You want to go? I said, no, I'm tired. I'm just going to lay here on the bed. It was hot Texas summer, getting some breeze through the window. And they all took off to the creek, and I laid there trying to go to sleep. But I heard somebody come down from the mountain right up above the cabin, just loud as heck, and walk right beside my window and get up on the porch. And they rummaged around for some stuff and left. And it was clearly human, so I thought it was one of the guys. And they came back later and said, I said, who came down from the mountain? Said, we haven't been on the mountain, we've been in the creek. And I said, well, I heard somebody walk right beside me, and it wasn't you guys. They said no. So if I had just leaned up for just a second, I would have seen one, and that's our goal. We talked about it our last training camp, that you've got to be vigilant every second, because you might have a little 3-second window to see one of these things just over and over and over. It's just 3 or 4 seconds. You're just super fast, and if you don't pay attention, you'll just miss it.
I will say that qualifies as an oops moment. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
it's embarrassing enough, though.
It sounds like a very deep regret.
I was just going to say, yeah, there's lots of times. I mean, and you've got to stay on top of it. And my friend Daryl Collier, who runs a lot of the operations, says, all I ask is just 1 week of you. Just be super, super vigilant. Put in all the effort you can. You know, if you're going to go lay down and take a nap, get your rest, but get up and get after it. And anything that you hear or think that could be going on, investigate it. Don't just ignore it and assume it's a barred owl or whatever. Just check it out, and that's our thing. We look into everything we hear or think that could be something that would help us.
Make a note about everything, no matter what little detail it might be. You never know when it might pan out to be something.
Yeah, one of our requirements is to keep a log for, every minute of every day, and we found patterns from that, and if we've worked towards those patterns, then it's paid off dividends.
We're coming up. We're going over an hour now, and I know you guys are out in the woods, so we've got a final question. It's our traditional question, and if you've listened to the show, you're probably familiar with it and already know what's coming. Jerry, given your whole life experience, who you are the entire time you've grown up, everything you've done, what is the monster under your bed?
What gives you the heebie-jeebies?
The heebie-jeebies. That's hard to say because, like I said, once you see one and had them around you, it doesn't really scare you. I think other people probably give me the heebie-jeebies. We're in a rural, remote area, but I'm scared that, somebody's going to come in and, somebody just murdered their wife and they're looking for a place to bury her, and I'm going to run across that person. So people scare me, the dog man. I think dog men are probably misrepresented, or wood apes, but excuse me, that's one of those things you'll probably have to cut up. Misrepresented Bigfoot.
That's okay. I think everybody knows.
Misidentified Bigfoot. I'm sorry. You'll have to edit that. Yeah, I think dogmen are misidentified Bigfoot, and so I don't even know where I was going with that.
You were talking about things that scare you, and I think it's important to know that you're sitting in the middle of an abandoned graveyard right now, and it's dark. And so we're asking you, what gives you, what scares you? We're asking the guy sitting in the graveyard in the middle of the night, what scares him?
Makes your hair stand on end. It makes your hair stand on end.
Yeah, what scares me, if I'm sitting by myself, I don't think they're going to bother me, and I don't think they're going to hurt me, but I think these animals are aggressive, and they do attack people. I've had some people that have had them charge at them, believe it or not, no video or anything, but I believe them because I can trust them, and they've never lied to me. But tonight, if I'm sitting by myself, and many times I've been sitting by myself and had something walk up behind me, that kind of gives me a start. Now, the thermal camera, that really is my safety blanket. I know I can look and see what it is, but that times when you're sitting by yourself or walking by yourself down a road and you hear what sounds like a big animal, whether it's big or not, coming towards you, that kind of gets the old adrenaline running.
I would agree with you there. I always thought when I first started out here in Texas, I didn't have a thermal and I didn't have night vision. And the first thing I bought was night vision. And there was a definite safety blanket being out in the woods with having that night vision.
Oh, I hear you.
Until you start using the night vision, and you realize in the woods how useless night vision can be, especially if you have just one of those couple of $100 models because you're starting out and you didn't spend a whole lot. And if it has to have an IR illuminator, all you're doing is illuminating the leaves right in front of you, and you can't see more than 5 feet in any direction anyway. And then you get that thermal, and your whole world opens up. And it's all great. And you feel nice and safe until it's raining and foggy. And all of a sudden, when you've got that moisture content, the air is all hot and humid, and your thermal's blind. You can see maybe 20 feet.
I have to say, I'm a virgin eye enthusiast. I don't do the equipment stuff well myself.
Well, you're just weird.
Well, you can attest for that. I hand it back to you. I'm like, okay, 5 seconds, I'm good.
She does. She'll be out in the middle of the woods. She'll sit there by herself. No thermal, no night vision, no nothing. She'll just go all night by herself without having to do anything. She won't even white light, which I'm actually kind of proud of.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
She will use a red every now and then, but it's just enough to like illuminate her feet or something like that if she has to. But otherwise, when we go out, we try to go out black as much as we can. And so I understand the thermal and the comfort that can be there.
Yeah, good for your wife not doing the white light, because once again, my old friend Smokey Crabtree said when thing first started coming to his house, and he was off on a welding trip, said his wife would hear it screaming outside in the backyard, and as soon as she flipped on the light, well, it would leave, and every time he thought he had been out hunting it and turned on a white light, it would leave, and that's been our experience. If you put on a light on one, it's gone. So just like I said all the time, just hold your water, just hang in there, sit there quiet, don't get up, don't move, just sit there until if it's an armadillo and it runs right up under your chair, you know what it is, or if it's an ape, you'll know.
This is true. Well, Jerry, did we miss anything you wanted to talk about?
Yes, one more thing. I want to plug our Bigfoot conference that we were going to have next month. It was in Colgate, Oklahoma.
Right.
And it was called the Boggy Bottom Conference. And we want everybody to know it's not canceled, it's just postponed.
Oh, that's
and we
good.
have an excellent lineup of speakers. And once again, when you go to the Falk Monster Festival or to the Honubby Conference, here, you're going to be right in the middle of Bigfoot territory. Matter of fact, we may raffle off a trip, maybe here to the graveyard or another area, for us to take you one night as a prize, for a silent auction or something. And right now, the sun has gone down, the moon's up, we've heard coyotes, it's really quiet, and there's no wind, thank goodness, and we're ready to go, and you never know.
When tentatively has it been rescheduled to? Do we have a set date yet?
No, we don't, because we're waiting on the state school board. And another good thing about it, all the money that's taken in at this conference goes to the Colgate school. So it's not just, we're not lining our pockets. We're helping children. And we're just going to have to wait and see. They may not have school the rest of the year in Oklahoma. And, there's definitely not going to be. And John Harrell's here. He's a teacher, and he's off for the year. So we'll just have to wait. My friend Craig Woolheater's got the Falk Conference and Honubby Conference, Oklahoma. And my buddy Lyle Blackburn, he's having hard times. Yeah, he's having a hard time because they're canceling them all. But my friend Marvin here said we may do one near Mena, Arkansas. That's another thing we've got in the works, and we'll actually be near some property where there's an animal or a group of animals that are nearly habituated, like the grandfather saw them and the father saw them and the children have seen them off and on through the years, so that ought to be pretty cool.
That would be interesting.
That would be good. Definitely. Please
keep us posted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want to do that, and we'll try to help spread the word around.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah, and there was a UFO sighting up there 2 or 3 years ago that was on one of the UFO shows. So there's some weird stuff that goes on around here. There's been some times here in this area near we've seen some strange lights through the trees, and I don't think it's Bigfoot related. It could be swamp gas or methane, but there's just, if you spend enough time out in the woods all night, you're going to see and hear some strange stuff. And yeah.
And it just makes it more fun. No, as long as you're not thinking it's all the same phenomena, you're fine.
Agreed.
All right, Jerry, I want to thank you and tell your friends thank you for letting you talk on the phone this long.
Yes, thank you, Jerry and company. We really do appreciate the time you've let us have.
Very much.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate being on the show, and we're going to have lots more stuff coming out about this. We're going to post some old reports from Atoka County and lots of information. I've got a Facebook page that's called Hunting Apes in America. My Life is a Big. So you can go there and read old posts, and go to my website and go to the very end and look at the videos and the pictures and some of the reports that, if I get around to writing another book, I'll have them in it.
All right.
Well,
that we will do.
Have fun on the rest of y'all's trip and stay safe.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's the key, isn't it? Stay safe.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yep. All right, Jerry, we're going to let you go. You have a good night.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Guests of Cryptid Connection are all members of the Cryptid Connection website. Join the community, a safe, secure, and private place for all your paranormal and cryptid pursuits.
Every cowboy, he always misses when he's aiming at the target in his head. And every broken man finds his idle hands grasping at tomorrow's promised land. And I've been thinking about running, and I'll get out on the town just for myself. And that's when I saw her, and she looked right through me. And when I said I do that day, I really do. thinking about the time that I have wasted sitting here. 'Cause I've been thinking that all this thinking is the thing that keeps me further from myself.
The music and soundtrack for the opening is from Epic Film Score by Alex Kaskin. The closing credits are Every Cowboy by Cellophane Sam.